the beginning. So today I want to talk about urge surfing. Now, this is a practice that's really, really helpful for anyone who struggles with any kinds of like major urges, or um, we use this a lot in recovery, but it doesn't have to be somebody who's struggling with substance use. It could be any kind of urge. Before I get into what urge surfing is and how to do it and doing a little script, I wanted to go over why urge surfing is helpful and why it is shown to have better results. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen here. Let's see how this works. Okay. So when we have an urge to do really anything, a lot of times people think of it as like from 0 to 100, like no urge and then an urge. But really what's happening, there's a lot of stuff going on under the hood. So in our brain, our stress response system is kind of the part of our brain that kind of spits out those urges and tries to get us to do things that maybe aren't really aligned with what we really want to be doing. So let's see here. So in our brain, this is what's happening. So first we have something in the environment that triggers some sort of response from us. And forgive this awful mess here. Okay. So first, this is some kind of trigger in the environment. We're picking up all kinds of signals all day long from the outside, our external environment, sounds, sights, smells, all kinds of things, words that people are saying. But when I say the environment, this could also be our internal environment as well. So even just thoughts and feelings, emotions, things like that can kind of trigger us to activate our stress response system. So what happens is there's some kind of input in our brain, and then that can activate our stress response system. And what our stress response system does is it tries to evaluate, is this a threat? That is N-E. Is this a threat or not? Now, if the thing that triggered me was I might not have my rent paid, is that a threat? Heck yeah, it's a threat. If I could potentially be homeless in the near future, that's a very much a threat to me. So then what happens is our brain goes, okay, so there's a threat. Now that I've determined that, what can I do about it? So the brain says, like, what kinds of coping skills do I have? What kinds of resources do I have? That kind of stuff. So say, for example, again, going back to the rent thing, if I have some money in the bank and rent is due, that's a threat, and I'm maybe not sure. But if I'm like, well, I do have some extra cushion money, or I can always do something, or I can pick up a couple extra hours, then maybe we're not going to have that same kind of fight or flight response I might have if, say, my bank account was at 0. Or even if I only had half the rent. Say, for example, the trigger is somebody, I'm going through a breakup, right? And most people would be like, that's not a threat, obviously, but our brain perceives it as a threat. Think about how humans kind of evolved over the years, right? So evolutionarily speaking, humans have always been community centered around being around other humans. And that was very important because what happens if you were just the lone hunter gatherer that got kicked out of the tribe and had to go venture on your own and do it by yourself? You probably didn't survive to pass on your genes. And so, emotional disconnection from other people, being ostracized from other people, being bullied by other people, these things are taken in our brain as threats. Because if that threatens the status quo, if that threatens my acceptance in this community, and then I might be ostracized, that is also a threat to the brain. The brain's like, no, these are my people. I'm going to be kicked out and then I'm going to die. Which is why when sometimes we're having like conflict with other people, like interpersonal conflict, sometimes it feels like it's life or death because our brain is saying this is life or death. So we have this trigger. Maybe it's a breakup threat. Yes. Okay. What are my coping skills? Well, maybe my coping skill has been eating or it's been going to substances, right? That's what I've been doing for a really, really long time. So then our brain's going to go, okay, I'm going to do that, right? If I have maybe some other coping skills that aren't as strong, so I could do some deep breathing, but I've only done that like 3 times. So that's not really in the pool of coping skills and resources that I have. So the brain assesses, are my coping skills and my resources enough to manage this threat? And if the coping skills we have aren't enough, say, like I said, we've only tried one breathing technique 2 times and we're not really good at that, then our brain goes to habit, right? How have I handled the situation in the past? Now, if I've been struggling with any kind of addiction for months, years at a time, our brain is going to go straight from this to that. All of this right here happens in like 50 milliseconds. The reason why that's important is because this is our threat response system. Imagine we're driving on the highway and somebody slams on their brakes. My body starts reacting before I've even had the chance to think about, well, should I push the brakes? Do I have enough brakes? Maybe I want to conserve my brakes. My brain doesn't go through that process. What happens is there's this trigger, there's some kind of environmental stimulus. It hits my brain, particularly my lizard brain that's like down by my brainstem, and then my body reacts before I've had a chance to think. And in that instance, that is survival, right? Well, that's how our brain deals with all kinds of threats, whether they're real or not. If the threat is that I think that somebody I care about doesn't like me, it doesn't matter whether the threat is real, my brain is acting like it's real. And so we go from this to this before we even have a chance to think about it. Now, this is where one of the most important things you can do in any kind of recovery, and I hate that this is a buzzword, and I hate that it is actually true, but mindfulness, right? So this is happening. And this is what leads to my clients saying, well, I was driving home and all of a sudden I looked up and I was right in front of the liquor store. And I don't know how I was paying for the stuff already before I even knew it. It was like just autopilot. And this is how this happens, because if we don't practice mindfulness, then this is going to happen and we're not going to be aware of it. If I don't know when I get in my car that in the back of my mind, my brain has determined that I'm going to go ahead and do my habit, then I'm not prepared, I'm not protected from this automatic situation here. So, this is why mindfulness is so important. And what they found, the studies that have found that people who practice mindfulness and people who practice urge surfing in particular tend to have far, far better outcomes, even though sometimes they're more uncomfortable. And some might ask why they're more uncomfortable and yet they're doing better. And that's because their perception of being uncomfortable is higher, but the other people are also uncomfortable. It's just this is going on in the background. I'm going to go ahead and get rid of that. So that all of that is going on in the background. And I wanted to go over that because I think it provides a lot more context and allows you to understand like what and why, right? Why is it that I'm trying really hard and then it's like I don't have control? And it's because you're not really controlling your brain. Your brain is kind of controlling you. And so this is where urge surfing comes in. Sometimes there's not going to be a way to run away or to distract from an urge. Sometimes we have to learn to just sit in it. And the more we can notice as our urges come and then as they recede, the more often that we can pick it up in our day to day life. And the better we get at not like allowing it to kind of control us.